And now we can freely move all of these around to make some really weird, fun graph shapes. And the ball bounces in the pattern of the graph that we've created. Okay, so finally we are going to look at the graph editor, which is the purpose of this video. So let's come down here to the timeline, hover your mouse over this divider line until you see the two arrows, and then click and drag up. And we're going to pull this up. Now you can see if I come over to the top left corner and hover my mouse over this icon, it says editor type. And the type of this editor is timeline. And if I click this, you can see here's a list of all of the editor types that exist in Blender. And every editor area has this icon up in the top left, letting you change it to any other editor in Blender, making Blender very easy to customize to your needs. So let's come over here and change this to the graph editor. And now we can see our graph, but we have lost the play and the pause buttons and our frame range buttons. So I'm going to do something different. Let's go back here and change this back to the timeline. And now you can see we have our buttons back. So I'm just going to pull this down again, but I'm going to pull it all the way down to where we only see that header bar with our buttons. And then in the bottom right corner, I'm going to hover my mouse until I see the crosshairs. Then I'm going to click and drag up. Now make sure your mouse is hovering over the preview editor and not the timeline. But now you can see we have a duplicated preview window of the 3D view. So let's go ahead and change this to the graph editor. And now we have our graph editor along with our timeline buttons that we need. So it's the best of both worlds. Just like the timeline, you can navigate in the graph editor, holding your middle mouse button down and dragging to move the view side to side and up and down. If you completely lose all of your keyframes for some reason, don't worry. All you have to do is press home on the keyboard and it will fit all of the keyframes into the view. And just to show you, I'm going to pull the timeline up just a little bit here and show you that these keyframes are the exact same. So the first keyframe, if I select that in the timeline, you can see it's selected in the graph editor. Same thing with the middle one and with this one. But you can see that there's an addition to these keyframes, which are the handles that are associated with it. In order to see those handles, you have to have the keyframe selected. So let's select the first keyframe here and click and drag the right handle anywhere you want, something like this. And now let's play our animation. And you can see how now the ball follows the curve of our animation a little bit differently. It's kind of like a roller coaster. It starts slow, and then when the curve gets steep, it goes really fast, and then it goes back up normally. And we can adjust this one down here too, any of these handles. So I'm just going to pull these out and make a shape that looks like this. So then it comes down really fast, slows down at the bottom, and then goes up really fast, and then slows down at the top. Okay, so let's pause our animation. Let's come back to frame 1, and then I'm going to quick adjust these as well. Now select the first keyframe, and I'm going to bring this down straight away, just like this. Now, before I hit play, can you guess what the behavior of the ball is going to look like? Well, since we have a sharp drop off here, it's going to go really fast, and then it's going to slow down when it starts to get close to the floor. Then it's going to go back up sharp and then slow down as it reaches the top. Okay, so let's go ahead and press play, and you can see that's exactly what it does. It goes down fast, slows down when it touches the floor, and then comes back up. And we can even change this over here on the right to match the same thing. So it goes down quick, stays down for a long time, and then goes back up quick. So you may have also noticed that the handles act like little seesaws. So if I move one of them, the other one moves the opposite direction. So let's take this bottom one here and let's pull it way down. Something like this. And now look at the result. You can see that the ball is now dipping below the floor and then coming back up as if it's being dunked into water. And that is because if we take a look at our keyframe, on frame 20, our keyframe is at the value of 1. So if we zoom in here and we follow this line, you can see this line goes to the value of 1. And if we zoom out, you can see that the curve actually goes below the value of 1 to a value of -2. So it will go down below, and it goes below our floor and then back up when the curve goes back up. And I can switch the direction here. And now, straight away, it goes down past the floor and then back up. All right, what if I move this one up like this? What direction do you think it's going to start off in? Right now, if we zoom in here, you can see we're on the value of 7. So the curve goes up to this line where it says 10. So what direction can you guess that it's going to go when I press play? If you said up, you are absolutely right. It goes up straight away. So it goes up and then sharply back down past the floor and then back up again. And we can even make that even steeper, going way past the floor, like it's being dunked into water and back out. Okay, so let's adjust this here. Let's go ahead and press home. And then I'm going to select everything by pressing A. Then let's come up here to key. And you see this drop down here. If for some reason your graph editor is low like this, the drop down will actually go up in opposite order. So just to be aware of that. So whichever way it is, either up or down, select your key and then choose handle type. And you can see the shortcut for that is V. And then let's come down here and choose auto clamped. And now all of our keyframes are back to the way they started. Let's press home again and you can see this is how it was. And that's what the original curve looks like. So let's come back up to key and remember that the handle type is the shortcut V. So let's just come back out here, hover your mouse over the graph editor and press V. And now let's come to the top and choose free. If I click out to deselect everything and then click the bottom one here, and now you can see if I select one of the handles, the other handle does not follow in the opposite direction anymore. They are now moving freely independent of each other, which allows us to do something that looks like this. Now if I press play, you can see we have this really quick like bouncing motion. It starts off slow, then there's a sharp fall off down, followed by a sharp fall off up, and then it slows back down when it gets to the top. So it gives it this hard bounce kind of look. Wha-boom, wha-boom, wha-boom. And of course I can come here and select any of these and do the same. And we can start to make some really unique curves just freely moving these handles around. Now I'm not really making anything specific right now, just kind of having fun moving them around. So go ahead and do that and see what kind of result you can get. Now don't move the actual keyframes just yet. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Just move the handles around and see what kind of curve you can come up with. Okay, so I'm going to leave the animation playing, but I'm going to reset everything. So I'm going to press A to select all of them, V, and then choose auto clamped again. And we've reset it back to our original curve. Again, I'm going to keep it playing, press V, and this time I'm going to select vector. And then I'm going to click this bottom one here, and you can see that the vector is a straight line between one point directly to another. So there really is no curve. It's just a linear motion because it's one line. So it's linear. It doesn't speed up or slow it down. It stays at a constant rate. Constant rate going down, constant rate going up. But we still have the handles that we can move, and then once we move them, we have now gone into the free form again, just like we had it before. Okay, so once again I'm going to reset our keyframes by selecting all of them, press V, and I'm not going to go over aligned or automatic because for our purposes right now they are very similar to the auto clamped, so I'm just going to choose auto clamped to reset them. Okay, so let's move the actual keyframe. So let's select this bottom one down here, and if I play the animation, and then I can click and drag this around. I can drag it front to back to make it faster or slower. And this is just like the timeline, except if I pull the timeline up here, you can see it's going back and forth, left and right. But the timeline itself doesn't have an up and down, and the graph editor does. So you can see that even though I'm going up and down in the graph editor, the timeline just stays on the horizontal axis. And if I bring the keyframe up, now you can see that the ball doesn't even get close to the floor. Or I can pull it down way past the floor. So moving the keyframe up and down in the graph editor will adjust its value, positive or negative. And if I move it way up here, you can see it doesn't go down at all, it just goes up. And if I move it closer to the front, it goes fast at first and then slow back down. Or closer to the back, it goes slowly up and then fast down. And just like the timeline, I can click and drag over multiple keyframes, press G to grab them, and then move them anywhere on the graph. So this is what we have now. But let's say I want to reset these. Well, we could select everything, and I'm just going to change this a little bit more. Let's select all of them, press V, choose free. And if I grab this handle, you can see I'm grabbing all of them at the same time. I can just grab this one down here. Just going to move these around a little bit, make something really weird like this. Now, in order to reset this, I could just select everything, press V, and then choose auto clamped, but you can see this is not our original curve. So we've actually got to move our points back to where they were. But this is a little difficult to do manually if we click and drag because we don't really have a lot of accuracy. You can see we've got 5.6 and some change, and it's very difficult to get that to be 5 even or to be 7 even. So there's a way around this, and if we hover our mouse over the graph editor and press N on the keyboard to open up the properties, we see a whole bunch of mathematical equations and even a DNA sign there. Don't worry, this looks like a lot. It's actually very simple. Now, if you don't see these options, it's because you don't have an active keyframe. In the graph editor, there's a difference between selected keyframes and active keyframes. You can see these keyframes are selected, but none of them are active. So to make something active, I have to actually actively click on it. And now it turns white, which means that that is the active keyframe. Now this is different than the timeline where the white keyframes were unselected. In the graph editor, the white keyframe is the active keyframe, and you can only have one active keyframe at a time. So with my active keyframe, I can select everything by dragging a box over it, and now you can see everything is selected, but the ones that are not active are orange. If I click to deselect and then just press A to select everything, you can see I have no active selection and I don't have any of those options. Again, I don't even have the F-curve tab anymore. So I just need to click on one of them and then it comes back. I know that can get a little confusing. Just remember, if you don't see anything, make sure you have an active selection by actively clicking on something. But for now, we're going to close these. Let's go ahead and close the top one that says Active F-curve, and then we can click on Active Keyframe to close that. You can see there's only two things here, really, that take up the space. And make sure you're on the F-curve tab. There's Modifiers and View tab as well. Just make sure you're on the F-curve, and we're going to open up the Active Keyframe again. And there's only three areas here. This one, and this one. And if we pull this out, you can see what they are. We have our keyframe, our left handle type, and our right handle type. So this is our keyframe, our left handle type, and our right handle type. So our keyframe, if we select our keyframe and move it around, you can see what's happening. All of these values are changing. But I can click and drag in these values back and forth, and it will change it back and forth. So this first one is the frame number. So right now it's changing the frame, what frame number the key is on. This one changes the value, up and down, higher or lower. So to get back to the original, we know the last keyframe was on frame 40. So I can just click in there and type 40. And we also know the value of the last keyframe was supposed to be at 7. So let's go ahead and click in here and type 7. Now we have it on the exact keyframe we want with the exact value we want. So let's select the middle one and do the same thing. We want the keyframe to be on frame 20, and then we want the value to be at 1. All right, and then the first keyframe, it's already on frame 1, but the value needs to be 7. And there we go. Let's adjust the graph editor again. And there's our original curve. Let's close the property panel with N again. And don't forget, we can still add keyframes wherever we want by this button right here. Ta-da! We added a keyframe on frame 10, and then we go to frame 30 and add another keyframe there as well. Select everything, press V, choose free, and now we can freely move all of these around to make some really weird, fun graph shapes. And the ball bounces in the pattern of the graph that we've created. I can also select one, shift select another one to select multiple, or I can click out to deselect everything and then drag a box around the ones that I want. Then I can press X and then delete keyframes. Also, same thing we did on the timeline, we can duplicate them with Shift D. And if I start to move my mouse, I can just drag that point around wherever I want. Left click to place it here, and then move these handles around here, something like that, and then I can move that, if I change my mind, move that over here, just clicking and dragging all of these points around wherever I want them to be. So let's press play, and you can see this in real time. So if I have it over here, that's what it looks like, and if I have it over here, that's what it looks like. And I can adjust these in real time and see the result of our ball bounce or our ball movement in real time. Let's delete this extra keyframe. Let's go ahead and reset everything that we've done. Make sure we're back at our original curve. And now it is your turn. Your challenge now is, with all of the things you've learned in this lesson and the previous lesson, to make the ball again bounce 3 times instead of once, but only using the graph editor to do it. And again, I don't care what the bounce looks like. I don't care how long it is. I don't care how high it bounces. I don't care how low it bounces. Just make it bounce 3 times. Now, if you watch my mouse, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint on the motion that I will do after your challenge. So mine is going to look something like this. So can you recreate, if you want to try to recreate this motion? I'm doing this with my mouse so that you can kind of see maybe what your graph should look like. So there's a hint, but anyway, the point is to have fun with it, experiment, try things out, get used to it, get used to the graph editor and the handles. So get ready and pause the video now. All right, welcome back. How did you do? So let me show you how I would go about making 3 bounces. I'm going to do it in a similar way that I did in the last video. And I'm going to select the first keyframe and just pull this handle out, something like that, just to make a little arc. And then let's come down here and actually let's select everything and make these free again so that I can freely move these. Take the bottom one here and move that up. And let's go back to the first one. So I want to adjust both of these so that they make this little arc here. Okay, so then I'm going to take this one and bring it down over here and adjust these handles to where the arc comes up to about halfway. Well, it's a little over halfway, but it's on this line 4 here, which is fine. And let's open the properties again, and I'm going to make sure that this keyframe is on the value of 1, because that is where it touches the floor. Okay, so let's be lazy again. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this out. And then select this one. Come over here, change this to 1 as well. And then we can zoom in here and adjust these. Whoops. Let's make sure we are selecting the right one here, the handle, and adjusting these to make a little bit of smaller bounce. So we've got 1 bounce and then 2 bounces, and then they're getting smaller as I go. So you can see if I scrub through, that's what it looks like. And now we've got to make one more, and I could just duplicate it like I just did, but I'm going to show you a different way. So we can come over here again to our keyframe button and just click that to add a keyframe. Of course, we need to change our handle type to free, and then, oops, deselect everything, select this point again, and adjust it. Let's zoom in. I keep selecting the wrong thing here. There we go. And adjusting these handles, something like that. Okay, so now we have 3 bounces. 1, 2, 3. Boom, boom, boom. And then it rests on the ground. So that is how I would go about making a 3-bounce ball if I wanted to make it look semi-realistic as it's bouncing down on a floor. So congratulations, you have now just made your first ball bounce with the graph editor using animation curves in Blender.
Yay!
Now maybe some of you did this to where you actually made a keyframe here on the top. So something like this. And this is just fine if you wanted to do this. Then you can have a lot more control over this. And we change this to free, of course. And now we have a lot more control. So if you wanted more control over that, definitely this is an option. But we did this in the timeline because we didn't have curves. With the graph editor, we can actually just use the curves for that curve. So we don't actually need a keyframe there at all. We have plenty of ways to make that arc just by using the handles that are on the ground. So I know that was a lot of information, and I hope it wasn't too confusing, but just play around with the graph editor, play around with making the ball bounce longer or shorter or higher or lower. And as always, have fun with it and be creative and create your own fun curves and watch the ball move as you bend it to your will. And then once you've familiarized yourself with the graph editor, in the next video we will start to add other animations such as making the ball squish a little bit when it hits the floor. So when you're ready, head on over to the next one.